Good evening. Tonight I want to read an essay that I just finished writing. And yeah, just kind of test this out and see if there's any response to it. These are important times for me personally, as well as all of us for a variety of reasons. And this essay reflects on what that looks like for me. It is called Leaving America Again. And it goes like this: Leaving America Again. It's October 25, and life has brought me to Italy for the first time. Crispy brown leaves, crinkly older men billowing smoke, and early morning shoppers with bags lit with groceries and stuff all stream in front of me as I sit in front of a cafe looking onto a piazza in Reggio Emilia, Italy. I'm visiting here now, joining an academic congress focused on social justice and education for several days. However, and this is a direct contradiction to the nearly entirety of the rest of my life right now, where almost every day of the week I work as a kitchen helper in a highway diner under the tutelage of a salty Greek cook. It hasn't always been that way, though. It was just last May when I fled permanently from the Pacific Northwest in the US to Alberta, Canada, to escape the prospect of being detained by the Trump regime without my adult child, a position in my field, a home, or the chosen family I'd cultivated for more than 2 decades. My partner and her kids, the dogs, cats, chickens, gardens, and tiny cabin we built were all left behind me in Oregon. That chosen family includes my best friends and their families, and all of these matter to me. But I'd been in this position before, and this was another case of leaving America again. You see, when I was a small child, my family was constantly homeless. For the first decade of my life, we moved from city to city, motel to motel, and more so that my dad could keep escaping his demons. As a Montana farm boy, he had signed up for the Marines to serve in Vietnam. And after disappearing from his life for several years, after he got back, he emerged in Western Canada, where I was born. A salesman by trade, Dad was supposedly good at what he did when he could do it. Combined with the unceasing demands of his undiagnosed, untreated post traumatic stress, his self determined entrepreneurialism and a sense of rugged individualism led him to drag his 4 kids and my mom from job to job as he eked out money to pay bills and feed the family. During those years, he wasn't awfully or often successful. Instead, Dad struggled to keep a job and to stay on the right side of the law. We constantly moved, living with the motto that if it doesn't fit in the back of the car and the trunk, it doesn't come. Sometimes we were escaping the law, sometimes unpaid bills, but always the demons from the war he fought. I learned early that my keepsakes didn't fit into that equation, and only found out as an adult that my sense of security and safety weren't considered at all. By second grade, I had attended 8 schools and was imbued with insecurities that had crippled my self confidence and learning abilities well into my adulthood. In the 1980s, along with those bowl haircuts and the flagrant fashion violations that social media makes seem like they were ever present, my family was regularly displaced, sleeping in the back seat of old cars, under streetlights on old highways, or tucked away inside of dilapidated roadside motels. Those memories are punched up in my thoughts with feelings of hunger from too little food, Christmas presents in brown paper bags, and a birthday cupcake that I was grateful to share with my siblings. Illegal border crossings where we'd stuff our pet ferret Ralph. He was all wiry and buoyant. We'd stuff him into the glove compartment or under the seat to get him across while Dad lied about our citizenship. There's no way for kids to grow up, especially me. We finally landed when I was around 10 years old. Over several years, we'd lived throughout the mountain west of Canada and the US, but in 1984, my parents decided to move to Omaha, Nebraska, somewhere in middle America. After living in the basements and spare rooms of strangers, we eventually moved into a mobile home trailer where some of the city's poor white trash lived. Scrungy 1950s trailers that probably housed 100 people in the previous 30 years, each held together with the coat of paint on the outside. Their insides were pitched in foreboding darkness. Grainy brown wood paneling and coarse, dirty shag carpeting lined the insides, and it wasn't a great thing. After riding a bus to get to another neighborhood's elementary school for a year and getting jumped outside the trailer court more than once, Mom insisted that our family move to a regular house in a neighborhood with streetlights and sidewalks and curbs, all of which were missing from the trailer court. So we moved just less than a half mile away, but a world apart. For the next decade, I grew up in a community called North Omaha. It was built as a bucolic, sprawling, tree lined suburb more than a century ago. But by the time that my very white family got there, white flight was almost over. Complex decades of social change and economic devastation wailed on the neighborhoods throughout the community, including ours, robbing the commercial infrastructure and the social fabric and replacing them with a blanket of despair and depression that gripped everybody throughout the entire neighborhood. It kept hopelessness intact. As my dad found help for his disorder and my mom invested in her own healing, I was mentored by determined Black neighbors and leaders being set up and supported by well meaning white liberals who came to our neighborhood to help. My siblings didn't fare as well as I did, and I became the only kid in our family to graduate high school on time. The others had their own adventures, and they're good people today, for sure, but our trajectories have been really different, at least until now. That site of my youth, North Omaha, became indelibly etched into my conscience. My experiences there seem to have encapsulated the intention of James Baldwin when he challenged us by writing, "The children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe." And I'm beginning to suspect that whoever is capable of recognizing this is incapable of mortality. Those people who ignored us in North Omaha were inhumane, Im- immoral people who didn't believe that we were humans as kids. But African Americans in the community all around me, they supported me. A goofy white Canadian country boy wearing cowboy boots and corduroy jeans, while middle class missionary social workers dragged me along despite my own best attempts to undermine their norms and self sabotage their efforts to help me. Teachers of all kinds seemed to betray me, and I didn't trust what felt like judgmental, arbitrary grading and punishments that were handed out to me at what felt like every turn. It was when I was young that I found my trajectory for my career, though. When I was 14 years old, a man my mom worked with asked if I wanted a job for the summer, called Idu Maduli. He was a beautifully tall and energetic man who stood at 6'4" and had long, determined dreadlocks. Almost like a character from Sesame Street, every time Idu went into the nonprofit or out onto the street, kids flocked to him, calling out his name and looking for his attention. He was generous with a smile and hands held out, long fingers. And back then, when an adult man could hug children, a lot of kids sought that greeting from his warm embrace. My sisters were both students of his, and when he asked me to help him teach, I asked, "What?" "Drama," he said. I replied that I didn't know anything about drama. He said, "You're 14, you know all about drama, Adam." I said, "I didn't know what to teach. I didn't know how to do that." He said, "To follow me for a while and you'll figure it out." So I followed him. And eventually, in a few weeks, I was teaching students of my own with Edu's support about African parables and basic theater skills that Edu was a master of, and I wanted to know. Edu was Omaha's premier African American actor and director then, and he took his theater program to a bunch of poor neighborhoods every summer to give under resourced, undereducated, and undervalued children a voice, power on the stage, and command over their expressions. Working with him for 3 summers in a row, It was a meaning-filled and constantly interesting job that I wholeheartedly did every day, all summer long. When those summers were over, though, I knew that I wanted to do something like that every day for the rest of my life, empowering and engaging young people everywhere, anytime I could. All of these adults helped me to envision a career in service to education and empowerment. And although I never taught in a school, over decades I facilitated for more than 1 million people, both young and older. Starting as a direct service provider, a line level worker, I began working as a nonprofit staff member, then became a community organizer, a community educator, and a national service member before I earned a degree in youth studies and popular education. Then I became a government worker, began my master's degree in education leadership, became a nonprofit executive, and eventually a full time consultant. Kids and youth came to programs and projects that I ran, while youth workers, classroom teachers, counselors, parents, and others listened to keynote speeches that I shared, focused on youth empowerment, voice, activism, and so much more. I wrote dozens of books, including polemics and monographs, curriculums, and guides. And my articles were published in academic journals and education magazines. I appeared at hundreds of conferences across the United States and Canada and around the world as a keynote speaker and seminar leader. And I loved my career dearly. My career as a contracted consultant puttered to a halt, though. It was during COVID that my work as a public speaker and freelance writer and professional development facilitator and project coordinator slowed down a lot. As nonprofits, government agencies, and schools increasingly faced economic setbacks in the aftermath, my work nearly came to an entire standstill. Fighting for attention in a saturated marketplace, paired with the shifting landscape of hiring priorities among my clients, put a stranglehold on my own efforts to promote youth engagement and social change and meaningful student involvement in education. It was 4 decades after my family of origin settled in the US that I found myself sitting idly, uncomfortably in Trump's America. The town where I lived was in the rural Pacific Northwest, and it seemed to be chock full of working class people whose bumper stickers, truck bed affixed flags, and everyday t shirts were slathered with slogans that were racist, anti immigration, anti public, and supporting a lot of other bigotry. It wasn't a stretch to believe that they were dead set against any form of integration in their own town. Right after Trump was inaugurated in January 2025, the media and social media began piping out stories of immigrants getting detained and deported for little or no reason at all. Media reports made me take action, and I began compiling a database of the names of detainees mentioned online, along with any relevant information I could find about them, like their names, genders, ages, nationalities, immigration statuses, whether or not they were accused of past crimes, and their statuses, whether they were stopped, detained, deported, or disappeared. In just 3 months, I collected more than 1,500 people on my spreadsheet, including single people and parents, children, and elders. Lots were brown people from the global south, especially Central and South America. There were Asians and Africans too, and far fewer people from the Middle East and elsewhere. But there were some white people, including loud cases from the UK, Denmark, and my own country, Canada. From the outset of this campaign against immigrants, I was fixated on the Canadian stories, including those belonging to a businesswoman, another one for a dad, and others who didn't have criminal records similar to me. Since long before I got my green card when I was 19, I'd been acutely aware of the need to keep my nose clean. I didn't always succeed, but I stayed close to the line most of the time. As Trump's ICE army began kidnapping people, though, it increasingly felt like my community organizing and activism would make me suspect. My skin crawled at the thought of losing my freedom and getting forcefully ejected from the country where I'd lived my entire adult life and then some. Talking with friends and colleagues heightened my consciousness, but the line between awareness and paranoia became increasingly blurry. I hadn't been able to find steady work for several years before this, and I thought maybe that would alert the authorities. I back taxes in the country, and I thought maybe the cross tabulations between ICE and IRS would put a target on my back. Some youthful indiscretions in my teens were wiped from my record, but when I read that others had been deported because of their supposedly erased juvenile crimes, I became really alert to the possibility that an SUV or a van with masked stormtroopers could sweep me up from my house, in front of my partner's kids, and away from the chickens and the dogs and the cats, and away from the family that I loved. It was too much to imagine, so I made the decision to leave the country. In May 2025, I went to the hamlet in the low rolling foothills of the Canadian Rockies, where my Alberta family calls home. An unincorporated business trip in the really rural area. There are 400 residents in town, with farmers and oil workers spread out around the surrounding area. Canola and hay fields cover land where cows aren't roaming, muskegs don't swamp the ground, and forests don't shade everything. Within weeks of arriving, I started working at my sister's restaurant as a kitchen helper, a line cook, trying my hardest to get things right while not burning myself on the massive pizza oven again. My shifts are short now, though, and even though the hours are meager, I've learned new things. And I fill the rest of my hours writing and reflecting, walking and working on my mom's house near the school. It's within each of those times and spaces that I find time to think about what's happening and who is suffering right now. In those moments, I go back to my own childhood, thinking about the children who were zip tied in Chicago this month, and the currently parentless kids nationwide whose mothers and fathers have been deported without them. Considering the parents who are choosing going into public to earn a living only to be violently detained versus hiding hungry in a church basement acting as a sanctuary, and remembering the stress and anxiety of feeling surveilled, hunted, and otherwise pursued by ghastly forces that entwine politics, culture, and economic power over others everywhere, all of the time. Their fear is constant and unabated. And then I remember. I remember waking up to the soft whimpering of one of my young sisters, rain tapping across the roof of our car. I remember being 7 years old, watching my mother reach back in that darkness, under that glaring light, to console her youngest daughter. And I remember seeing the water sheening across the glass with that glaring light of the street lamp from the highway, blaring into our car. Today, I imagine we were on a rural highway somewhere on the road between Omaha and Calgary, but I don't know for sure. It could have been one of the many other dozens of times that we moved. Since I was just a kid, I don't know much of what was really happening. But as an adult, I've come to accept that those unknown spaces and those unremembered realities are formative to my knowledge today, to my experience, to my reality as a 50-year-old repatriate to the country where I was born. The children who are suffering so much right now, they'll have questions like I did for the rest of their lives. Unknown blank spaces left only to their imaginations, good, bad, or otherwise. When I left America again just this last May, some of those blank spaces were filled in anew, both consciously and unconsciously. However, I am determined to maintain my hope in democratic societies, especially through radical social democracy. When I remember my own childhood and think about the lives of other kids living through the hellish realities in the US right now, I want nothing more than for each of us to remember what Maya Angelou charged us with when she wrote, "There's no time for despair, no place for self pity, no need for silence, and no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal." For me, that means that every moment's a time for healing. And my own journey drives me to keep focused on engaging people meaningfully, even when I'm working in the diner. Maybe someday I'll resume my career in a country that I don't have to leave again. But while I'm gone, I'll keep striving to fulfill Angelou's charge wherever, whenever, and however I can. My name's Adam Fletcher. Thanks for listening.